Your Honour, I call BAQ.
Will you take an oath on the Bible or an affirmation?
Sorry?
Will you take an oath on the Bible
Yes.
or on the Bible? Would you take that Bible there, and hold that for me, and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
Swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission.
That the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Ms. Vanessa.
Thank you, Your Honour. You've been given the suit.
Nothing but the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
Yes, thank you. Take a seat. Yes, Ms. Vanessa.
The contents of that true and correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I tender that statement.
It will become Exhibit 2824.
Sir, I invite you to read your statement.
My full name, or my name, is BAQ. I was born in 1963 and I'm currently 52. I come from a Catholic family. My father's ancestors were Irish Catholic miners who arrived in Ballarat in the 1860s. My great-great-grandfather was actually one of the men who helped build the church. In my family, particularly my father was and is very traditional. My mum wasn't Catholic, but she converted to Catholicism when she married my father, and my family went to church every week at St Lepius, Ballarat East. St Lepius Primary School, Ballarat East, was divided into two separate schools. They were on the same street, but they were separated by the church. One was run by the Sisters of Mercy and was co-educational. It had classes from kindergarten to grade 2, and I attended this school from 1968 to 1970. The other was run by the Christian Brothers and only taught boys. It had classes from grade 3 to grade 6, and I attended this school from 1971 to 1974. Most of the boys from the Sisters of Mercy School would transfer to the Christian Brothers School once they finished grade 2. Brother Fitzgerald. When I started in grade 3 at St Lepius Christian Brothers School, it was in 1971, and Brother Gerald Leo Fitzgerald was my class teacher. Brother Fitzgerald was a big man, at least he appeared that way. He was bald, scary, gruff and angry. That was his demeanour. He was renowned for both his violence and abuse. Older kids used to tell us, don't upset him or he will belt you. Every day our class had reading time just before lunch. It was around 11:30 a.m. to about 12 p.m. During that time we were all supposed to sit and read a book, and our desks were facing the front. While Brother Fitzgerald sat down the back of the classroom. Every day while we were reading, Brother Fitzgerald would choose a boy and ask him to come to the back of the room, or tell him to come to the back of the room. One day he chose me. When I got to the back of the classroom, Brother Fitzgerald sat me on his knee, cuddled me and fondled my genitals. Brother Fitzgerald chose a different boy every day, but he always chose someone. I believe he picked everyone in the class at least once, and after a period of time, however, he seemed to develop a particular interest in he developed an interest in particular boys and chose them more often. I remember that there were a couple of boys he picked regularly. Brother Fitzgerald chose me probably between 12 and 20 times during the year. Sometimes he would put his hand down my trousers. Other times he fondled me over the tops of my trousers or unzipped my shorts. We wore shorts in summer and long trousers in winter. Mostly he put his hands directly onto my genitals and kissed me. It was terrifying waiting each day to see who he would choose. When he did choose me, it was scary because he was big and he smelt. I remember Brother Fitzgerald used to fly off the handle if anyone in the class didn't read or turned around while he had a child on his knee. Brother Fitzgerald was a violent man. He had a wooden cane that was about 1 metre long and about 2 centimetres in diameter. It was used to measure the oil level in the tanks that we used for heating in the schoolyard. So it was constantly dipped in oil and extremely hard. Brother Fitzgerald hit me and most other children in the class on the legs, backside or back. I remember him regularly getting boys up the front and asking for them to drop their trousers. He would let them keep their undies on, but he belted them with a stick. I remember one day I got an answer wrong and Brother Fitzgerald came down and slapped me with his hand in the head and my glasses fell on the floor. Sometime during the year, I told my father about the abuse. I don't remember what I said, but I think I probably talked more about being beaten than being sexually abused. I probably did not have the understanding or language to communicate what was really going on. My father responded, "Well, you must have done something wrong. You must have deserved it. You just need to mend your ways so you don't cop it again." I also spoke to my mum, who responded along similar lines at the time. My father had gone to St. Alipius as well, and his upbringing dictated that the church, the Christian brothers and the priests were beyond reproach. In those days, it was family first, church second, and everything else third. At the end of the school year, there was an annual excursion to Lake Burrumbete, which is about 15 kilometres outside of Ballarat. It was tradition. Before we went, I remember grade 4 boys had warned us that Brother Fitzgerald would take the grade 3 boys to a separate location and make us swim in the nude. It seemed to me that it was common knowledge at the school and that this was the tradition and that the grade 3 boys did this each year. On the day of the picnic, the whole school went to the lake in buses. When we got there, all the other classes swam in one area with their bathers on. Brother Fitzgerald took our class off to another location on a secluded part of Lake Burrumbete. He told us all to swim in the nude. Then he got into the water. He was also nude. I remember him grabbing us and throwing us around in the water. I felt very uncomfortable, but it was not something I would have thought about challenging. It felt like it was expected because of what we had heard from the older kids. I remember after the swim, Brother Fitzgerald told us all to put our costumes back on, and we sat under a big tree, which was near the water. The boy sitting next to me was crying, and I asked him why he was crying, but he wouldn't say. Brother Robert Best was the school principal at this time. I cannot accept that he didn't know what was happening because all the children knew. He must have known this was going on. In 1972, I went into grade 4 and we had a lay teacher, Mrs. Wilcox, that year. She was great and I didn't have any problems with her. She was the antithesis of Brother Fitzgerald. She restored my enjoyment in school and I finished second in the class that year. Grade 5, Brother Farrell. In 1973, I went into grade 5. My class teacher was Brother Stephen Farrell. He was much younger than the other Christian brothers and had a better affinity with us boys. He was quite sporty, energetic and friendly, and I enjoyed his teaching. Brother Farrell used to arrange cricket games with Catholic primary schools, and a team of us played on Saturday mornings. One morning in October or November, we went to Mount Xavier, which was about 3 kilometres away, to play cricket. After the game, Brother Farrell said to us he wanted to take us on an overnight fishing camp because it was a beautiful day, and we're all excited about this. Brother Farrell told us to go home and check with our parents and be back at the school at 1 p.m. if we wanted to go. He told us to bring our sleeping bags as we were staying overnight and that he would bring some food. He said he would bring us back on Sunday morning for church. My parents let me go. About 9 other boys from my class came along. The Christian brothers at that stage had an old green flatbed, Bedford flatbed truck with a canopy on the back of it. We all loaded into the back of the truck and headed off to Gong Gong Reservoir, which is about 10 kilometres out of Ballarat. We parked in the bush, went fishing and cooked a barbecue for dinner. When it came to sleep, we all laid out our sleeping bags in the back of the truck in a line. I was right at the end of the tray next to the cabin. Brother Farrell was next to me, and on the other side was another boy. Brother Farrell said, "Okay, right, we're off to sleep," and everyone was silent. Brother Farrell then unzipped the side of my sleeping bag, reached in and grabbed my genitals. He fondled me with what felt like ages, rubbing my stomach and my genitals and masturbating my penis. He tried to insert his finger into my backside. I was absolutely terrified. I couldn't go anywhere because I was stuck at the end and Brother Farrell was squashing me against the side of the truck. It was pitch black and we were in the middle of the bush. I was too scared to cry or move. I wanted to ring my mum and dad. I just wanted to go home. Brother Farrell said nothing to me and I said nothing to him. I can't move. I wanted to ring my mum and dad. I just wanted to go home. I lay awake for an hour or two afterwards. When he stopped, it was dead quiet, but I can remember just lying there feeling numb. And I lay awake for an hour or two afterwards. When he stopped, it was dead quiet. I listened hard and I heard him. I spoke to this boy the next day and he said the same thing happened to him. I don't think either of us could believe what had happened. We had an expression we used to describe what happened in a dismissive way. It was a silly, childish expression. I think we used this term throughout grade 5 and grade 6 and maybe later. It became a generic expression of our genitals. From that point onwards, I was devastated. My trust in Brother Farrell was gone forever. Even though he was such a contrast to the violent Brother Fitzgerald, he was tarred with the same brush as the rest of them. The next year I went into grade 6, and the best thing that happened was that Brother Best left and Brother Egan took his place. Brother Egan was pretty stern and typical of an older Christian brother, but he was not physically abusive. I had seen Brother Best discipline children in the schoolyard many times, even though I wasn't in his class. I regularly saw him punching or throwing children to the ground, screaming at them, dragging them by the collar into a room. He was a terrifying man. I used to steer clear of him because I knew the smallest misdemeanour would result in an attack from him. I felt as though the mood of the school changed after Brother Best left and Brother Egan came. At that stage, I think Father George Pell had also come as school chaplain. He was a younger man who loved football, and I think at that stage he had a positive influence on the school. Father Ridsdale. When I was in grade 5 or 6, I was asked to go and see Father Ridsdale at the presbytery with a few other boys. I think our class teacher of some sort. The presbytery was next to St. Alipia's church and was about 100 metres down the road from the school. I remember being excited because we got to leave the school premise. When we got to the presbytery, we were told to sit in a wooden bench in a large passageway that ran down the middle of the building. Father Ridsdale called us into the room one by one, while the rest of us waited outside the passageway. I can't remember if I was called in first, second or third. I distinctly remember what happened inside the room and less so what happened outside. When it was my turn, I walked into the room. It looked a bit like an office. It was dark and dingy and had old furniture. Father Ridsdale told me to remove my trousers. He had had a friendly demeanour when I'd seen him before, but this time behind closed doors he was terrifying. I remember him telling me to bend over. I remember him putting his finger in my backside and masturbating me. I remember him getting angry that I didn't have an erection. Eventually he said, "Okay, get dressed and get out of here." He was very gruff, and when he said this, I also remember him saying, "Shut up and don't say anything about this, and off you go and sit outside." And I remember I walked out crying. I remember thinking, I hope I never have to go and run errands for him again. It might have been 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. I remember walking back to the school scared and upset, and I can't remember everything that happened, but I remember some facets of them like they were yesterday. I can still remember the room, the desk, how dark it was. I remember how scary he was and how he turned from what I thought was a friendly priest into someone who was just terrifying. St. Patrick's, Ballarat. After St. Alipius, I went to St. Patrick's College, Ballarat. There were mixed with there we were mixed with boys from St Patrick's Primary School and with boarders from other schools around the district. Many of the other boys had heard stories about what it was like to go to St Lepius Christian Brothers School. Many of them knew about Brother Fitzgerald's visits to Lake Burrumbeet at the end of the year, had learnt he had been doing for many years. It was notorious. If children from other totally separate primary schools in the area knew what was going on at St Lepius, that Bishop Mulcairns or Father Pell didn't know what was happening. It's inconceivable that they didn't know. In particular, I cannot accept that Bishop Mulcairns didn't know about Brother Fitzgerald. I can't accept that he was not told about Brother Fitzgerald's abuse, and Brother Fitzgerald would have abused almost every boy that came through his class at St Lepius for years. Years after I left St Lepius, I read about Gerald Ridsdale in the media. I remember feeling that it was with some solace in a morbid way that it just wasn't me who suffered what he did. I've had these memories for a very long time. Father Ridsdale came from a very upstanding Catholic family in Ballarat. These charges, my parents used to say, well, how could it be his ex-Ridsdale's brother? They were a wonderful family, it couldn't be right, but it was right. I understand Brother Fitzgerald faced charges as well, but he died before he was to face the court. My mother became acutely aware of the child abuse in Ballarat when an article appeared in the front page of the Ballarat Courier. This was the article about sexual abuse at St Lepius and listed the years that Fitzgerald, Best, Dowland and later Farrell were there. My mother joined the dots and said to me, "You were there, what happened?" I told her, and she was crushed that I was part of that. After the article, the media coverage of the abuse in Ballarat became a wave. There was Four Corners, and I knew some of the men on that. I went to school with them and had sat in the same room as them. I have great respect for the boys and girls who stood up and said this is wrong, it was institutionalised and rampant and endemic, and something needs to be done. But I cannot understand why it took so long. I don't feel guilt, but I do have a tiny piece of remaining loyalty to the church. Despite what they have done and what I've been through, I can't rationalise this, I really can't. I don't go to church anymore and I don't think I will again. I don't know what the specific impact of these incidents has been, but I know they have affected me. I have some issues trusting people, I have issues with intimacy and being close to people. I don't have one close male friend in my life, and I never have. I have better relationships with women because I trust them more. I find it extremely difficult to trust men. And I don't think that it's normal that I am a 52-year-old and can't point to one male person who I am or have ever been close to. And I feel bad about that because I feel like I've missed out. I think the abuse has impacted me in that simple sense. Throughout my life, I've tried to focus my energies towards developing a career and I've been successful. In my job, however, I'm required to have good relationships with males. One of the most difficult things I do at work is retain the facade of having those good relationships for the purposes of my job. Despite this, I feel like I am one of the lucky ones who has had a life. I'm one of the ones who perhaps can stand up and be strong enough to help those who can no longer help themselves or are intimidated by a process they can't stand up to. I hope that others who have been badly affected by the sexual abuse and who can't tell their story can benefit from me sharing my story.
Does anyone else have any questions of Mr BAQ? No, thank you, Mr BAQ. Thank you for your evidence. You're now excused.